Welcome back to the model room and happy Thanksgiving to everyone. You know, it's also Throwback Thursday, and I thought today I might like to take a look back at the days before we had videos or even internet. Back in the days when we connected to the hobby through our friends, our clubs, the hobby shops, but in a large way through periodicals and other paper media. So, welcome today to Throwback Thursday Literary Edition. Okay, starting out, turning the Wayback Machine way up to 1962 and 63. These are some of the original car model magazines from those early days. And you can see how small they were, not anywhere near the size of a regular magazine that you would see today. But they had color covers. And, you know, when you look at these, you're going to see that some of the cars that are in here, we will recognize. We know them, and we've heard of them or seen them in the museum or somewhere else. There are a lot of names in here that you will recognize as well. What's interesting about this one, this is from July and August of 1962. Here's the original article on the bobtail cat. You may remember that in that video I did about what model cars would you recommend to be on Mount Rushmore, this is one of my picks, the Bobtail Cat by Dave Shukless. So it's very interesting to see how he put this car together and what it entailed. I have seen the Bobtail Cat up close because it was restored for the museum, the International Model Car Builders Museum, by one of our members. But it's really great to see this in its pristine white styrene condition. So there's that, and there's all of these that are just so much fun to flip through. Well, sometimes flipping through these old magazines will bring back a memory. This one does it for me because I remember in junior high school, I went over to my buddy's house to hang out. And in his room, I saw that he was building a model car. And I said, I didn't know you built model cars. He said, yeah, I'm building this for Car Model Magazine. And of course, my friend was Doug Dempsey, and he was a writer for Car Model Magazine. This is the car, the 1967 GTO funny car. He had lengthened the body. He chopped the top. He made a frame out of an old yardstick that he found. He was doing all kinds of great things. He was doing little metal pieces on the front suspension. Here is the article, and it's pretty remarkable. Right here is a 2-scale rendering of the frame. And that was pretty unusual. It would be today. You don't get something that's in exactly the scale if you want to replicate it. He even had a throw-out bearing on the engine, just all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was a wonderful build. I actually never saw this car finished until many years later at GSL when I happened to come across this magazine. And that's how I knew that it got finished, got in the magazine. I didn't read a lot of model car magazines in those days. But in any case, once I was at GSL and I thought it would be a great idea to try and find these old cars, I got in contact with Doug. And it turned out it was just a little too late. His property backed up to a little creek, and they had that like once in half a century rainstorm where the creek overflowed, and somehow I got a little bit into the house, and his mom threw away the model cars because she thought they were wrecked. I missed it by 2 years. I actually did try to replicate it and managed to stretch the body pretty well. Always had trouble with that frame. I tried it 2 or 3 times and it never came out straight. It was always crooked, and I finally got a little discouraged and just put it on the back burner where it's been for many years. But you'll remember Doug because he also built this car. This is the double charger Mustang with 2 engines in it. Here is the article, and the reason a lot of people would remember this is because it appeared in ads for Auto World for their lettering system. And here's an article that Doug did on lettering the double charger. Pretty neat stuff. I'm glad I have these old magazines. By the way, Doug had a great career as a cinematographer, and he lives up with his wife in New England now. So, good story. I don't have any first issues of any magazines, but this is volume 3, number 3 of Plastic Fanatic. And I think the magazine at this time was 2.5 years old, so I think this was probably around 1988, something like that, the winter issue of 88. And you know, this was Roy Sorensen's magazine back in the day, later turned into a Model Cars magazine when it was taken over by Greg Hutchings. This particular issue, you can tell it's kind of rough. The paper's not very slick. Everything is black and white inside. What really is interesting to me is that the font that was used for the articles was the kind of thing you would see in a typewriter. And I'm wondering if they didn't actually use a typewriter to make this up and then copy it over to the magazine. If you look at this one, then you can see things are a little better. The cover's a little slicker. It's smooth. It's still black and white. Inside, though, the type is much better, more like you would see in a magazine. They were moving along. And then this one is from November of 1990. Again, a very glossy cover, and inside the pages were glossy. The print was pretty normal for a magazine, that sort of thing. But, you know, a lot of content in here. He had a lot of pictures. He covered a lot of stuff. He did builds and resins, all this kind of stuff. And even had a sketch pad back then. So pretty cool to have some of these early things. It's interesting because the very first car that I ever had in a magazine was in Plastic Fanatic. Well, let me show you. Here it is, Plastic Fanatic from 94, and you can see they've moved up to having color on the cover. Inside, that was still pretty much black and white, but right here is my 32 Ford Hot Rod. I did a video on this, a Cars and Coffee, not too long ago, but it got inside this issue of the magazine. And frankly, I did buy the magazine, and I was surprised to see it in there. Well, I was very happy, and I'd never had a car in a magazine before. There it is. And I can't do a video about the old model car magazines without mentioning Model Car Journal. This was produced by Dennis Doty, a well-known modeler, and I kind of got a kick out of it. Back in the early 90s, I used to read this quite a lot, and I enjoyed it not just for the coverage of the model cars and things, but he covered everything. Here's promos and slot cars, all kinds of stuff. Here is an article, or rather a column, by a fellow named Don Elliott, who was called the Junk Man, and he did, this is the Hot Wheels cars here, but he'd do those little vacuum form plastic cars, all kinds of little things, collectible Matchbox cars. It just covered the gamut. It was just so interesting to see all the stuff that was out there for people that like to collect car memorabilia or car stuff. Of course, the grand old man of the old model car magazines was Scale Auto Enthusiast, Gary Schmidt's magazine. And I loved it. And I have to put this in here because this was my favorite issue of SAE of all time, the Mini Mopar Muscle issue. And it's so great. In addition to great models in there, I think there are 4 articles by Bill Coulter. There's a couple by George Boyachik, and I think there's 1 or 2 by Rick Hanmore. There's just so much in here. It's a great, or was a great magazine. It's gone now, of course, but there's plenty in here on building and collecting, how to do things. Here's an article on Juha Airo, and you know, one of the great modelers of all time, and they showcased many of his cars. I miss Scale Auto. I know that magazines are not quite in favor now, but I used to enjoy getting it every couple of months. All right, here's something in print that's not a periodical. This is a calendar by Jarris Watson. And you know, we lost Jarris just earlier this year. Sorry to see him go. He was a great guy, and I really enjoyed all of his artwork. I have a lot of stuff from him. I have a mouse pad that I use, and I don't know if I showed that in a prior video or not. But this was really cool. I had it up on the wall in 2004, so man, more than 20 years old now. But what's interesting is that once in a while, Jarris would throw in something a little different or a little unusual. Here is artwork of him and Greg Hutchings having a road race along some canyon. Very interesting. He put photos in those days of the guys in there because I don't think there was a lot of AI art going around back then. Here's another one. This is Matt Wells, who owned Scale Motorsport at the time. Matt was a good guy, is a good guy. And he had kind of a stylized image in this one. This was a fun calendar. So why am I putting Custom Rodder in this video? Well, for one thing, this was a great issue. That's Jack Trepannier's custom Chevy on the cover, inside of the Titus Brothers. Bill Hines doing a top chop. Barris is in there. There's all kinds of stuff in here. But I want to bring up this. Who remembers this column? Custom Rodding and Scale. And that is, yeah, that's Rick Hanmore. Probably took that shot when he was about 20 years old. But that's him, and he did this article, this column rather, for several years. And it was a great one. all kinds of stuff in here about what's available for modeling, things to do, how to build stuff. Here is a shot of AccuPro, remember them? And the Model Car Garage, still going, good for them. But it was a great column and very wonderful to be able to open this up and take a look again back to those nostalgic days when we had model car columns in a regular car magazine. So I'm throwing this one in just for fun. This was back in 2001, so almost a quarter century ago. See how many of these guys you can recognize. It's GSL. 2001 was the first one I ever attended, and on the first morning I got invited to a breakfast that was hosted by Dave Pye, who did the diorama column in Model Cars magazine at the time. I had no idea why I was there because the place was full of great names in our modeling community, and that wasn't me. I was like the proverbial brown shoe in a room full of tuxedos, but boy was I glad to be there. I really got a kick out of it. I met some of these guys that are really kind of like my heroes in the modeling world. So here we go. This is Greg Hutchings from Model Cars Magazine. Next to him, Jim Keeler, the legend from Revell and then later Aurora. Back here, this is Rick Golding. I think he's still doing aftermarket parts. And then this is Bob Paith, who worked with Jim at Revell. Bob Coronel, still doing the Model Car Garage stuff. Does a great job. I love his stuff. Between them, I don't know who this fellow is in the back. Probably the son of someone that was there. This is Moose Kalin, Andy Kalin. They called him Moose, and he was a fixture at GSL for many, many years. Very popular guy. Here is another legend. This is Augie Hiscano, who was a big name back in the 60s, won some of the national contests, had several cars in the Air National Model Car Builders Museum. Here's Dave Pye, with his son. The son, of course, is grown now. This is me as a young guy. I had hair then. And I'm with my good buddy, Tom Geiger, who is the president of the Tri-State Club and president of NNL East. Back here, I believe this is Rick Hoving. He came in from Europe for the show. And Pat Covert, who did a column in Scale Auto Enthusiast. Next to him, that's Juha Airo, one of the great modelers of all time. He came in from Finland. I was so happy to meet him. It was just a wonderful experience. And Kirk Bell, also of Scale Auto Enthusiast magazine. Finally, on the end, a well-known modeler, Mark Havacan. So it was a great time. I just thought I'd throw this out there. I think this ran in Model Cars magazine, this picture. Back in the day, Greg would do that sort of thing. But it was a fun time. And that's it. Thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it very much. I'm very thankful for all the friends that I have in the model car community. They're all great people and I admire them greatly. And thanks to all my viewers and to the subscribers. Next time, working on those group builds and you'll see it shortly. Take it easy.